Less Than 2000.
The podcast.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Thanks for listening to us this year. We really appreciate it. This is the last episode of 2020. Thank God this awful year is almost over. Chad, the only thing good about this year, really, was the fact that we did this podcast.
And I mean, thank God we did. We always talked about doing this, but thank God we did when we did, because honestly, people are stuck at home, and the 80s and the 90s were so amazing. Why wouldn't you want to go back to a time when you weren't trapped in your house during a pandemic with all of the crap going on? This is the right time to do this because people needed a little dash of memory lane.
Speaking of memory lane, thanks for setting that up so nicely. We didn't talk about doing this, but I just thought we would maybe give the audience a little bit of background on the history of the show. This being the last episode of 2020, let's go back and talk about just a little bit of the origins of the show. Now, you've probably picked up, everybody, that Chad and I have been friends for a very, very long time. We moved in across from each other when I was 6 and he was 7. So we really became friends when Chad's dad got a video camera. And then we started making home movies together. That's when, in 1990 or 91, is when our friendship really started to form. I believe it was summer of 91 is when we shot our first big thing
July
together.
4th.
Yes.
July 4th, 91.
So at that time, we were both 10 years old. And that bonded our friendship forever. We made multiple Terminator movies together. We made so many movies and did creative things. We had a radio show as far back as 5th and 6th grade.
We had our own radio show. Yes. I mean, we were born to do this. I mean, let's just say we were practicing radio by the time we were 10. Think about that.
Yeah, and I always dreamed of being like sort of Wayne's World, Wayne and Garth sort of situation. You know how they started out on cable access as best friends, just recording from their basement, and then they became a big deal and had their own national show and all that stuff.
Was it just because the movie Wayne's World was so awesome because it came out when we were young, and so we really, really liked it? Because looking back on the Wayne's World sketches and on the movie, they were like in their basement doing crap. I mean, it was not really that good. I mean, that's like aspiring to a lower common denominator.
You realize that making a podcast is the equivalent of cable access in 2020.
Oh, no. We're doing it. I was talking crap on it, like as if we are not in our houses.
Yeah.
Basically doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Over Zoom with a microphone in front of us.
And we started in your basement, literally in your basement studio. So like we would still be doing it in the basement, but for COVID. You know, we grew up together making films and radio shows for ourselves. Then we went our separate ways. I went off to college and I studied film. Chad got into the industry and started menial tasks, and now he's up to, director, producer guy. So we our paths diverged for a long period of time. I went off to study film. He went off to actually do it. This all started back in January of 2020. I was in the Victoria Inn in Columbus, Nebraska. You were driving around in LA, and I was in an Uber. And you called me up and talked about making an adaptation of Less Than Zero onto film.
Yeah, I called you up and I said, "Do you think the world is ready for a reboot of Less Than Zero?" To which you shut it down immediately.
I did. I thought it would be really unrelatable, especially in the climate we're currently in. Like, nobody wants to see a movie about entitled white people sniffing their lives away and ruining the great advantages they have in their life. I'm like, that's just not going to sell in 2020. But a couple days go by and we talk about, hey, let's do a show about 80s and 90s, just cool stuff about 80s and 90s. So we're talking about doing it just for shits and giggles, 80s, 90s retrospective, and we thought, what would be the name of that show? And we talked about it, and having just had the conversation about Less Than Zero, somebody threw out there Less Than 2000.
Well, yeah, because we were kind of sitting around talking about how the world went to hell around the year 2000 and how everything really post-2000, especially, you can't stand any pop culture past then. I stay dabbling in it. You're like It's like it's like repulsive to you.
Some of that's a little played up for the show, but yeah.
But no, so it all of a sudden it was like, well, how about less than 2000? I mean, if everything sucks past, 2000, 2001, that'd be the great title. And it's what a tribute to Bret, Easton, Ellis. That really ties into our topic today, less than zero, because if anybody's read the book, let's talk about the book. The movie was pure garbage, and I'm not going to hide that this episode at all. We can celebrate maybe some things that are good, but when it comes to the book sets you up for 150, 160 pages of the 208 of this whole personality of who Clay is, and then just completely rolls you over as a reader and just gut punches you for like 30 pages, and then it's the end.
Absolutely.
So you liked the last 30.
Well, I remember when we were trying to both reread this week and be ready to record today. I knew you were a little bit behind, and I said, you can basically kind of skim, just don't skip it, but you can skim the first 100 of pages or so. You do yourself a disservice if you skip ahead. It's deliberately written that way.
Yes.
That's part of the mastery of the prose, of the writing of Bret Easton Ellis.
Totally.
Is that it kind of, go ahead. You can pick up
I mean,
a thought.
if you would have come in with any of that dark stuff before you got all the way to the last 30 pages, it wouldn't have worked. It would have hit you out of nowhere. The whole point that Bret Easton Ellis did was he lets you become numb to the world, the locations, the people, the dress. I mean, the names that come flying at you, and every scene is circling, and it's random, and it's full of just lethargic apathy, and really just mundane crap, and you get lost in that world. So by the time real decisions have to be made, you're just numb to everything that is the life in California.
Yes, and so if you are to skim those pages, you don't get the gut punch that is the last 30, 40 pages or so. It's like almost a hypnotic way of writing, because it's one party to the next, one club to the next, one restaurant, fancy restaurant, one thing to the next, the same people over and over and over again, repetition. But that is part of the reason this story is so effective. It does kind of lull you. It does kind of make you think, where's the meat of this? Nothing's really happening. What is the point? There really is no antagonist. There really is no plot, actually, if you think about it.
There isn't.
It's just things happening. And the reason we remember this book so much, I think, is because of the last, third of it. But without the previous 2/3 doing its job, the end does not have the same effect.
No, it would be cheapening the effect. And I think, and that's why I'm glad I know I made the comment about, you telling me about the first 100 on page 94. I'm glad I didn't skip it, because I hadn't read this book since what, 2002, 2003. I mean, I had forgotten a lot of it, and it was such a great treat. Now, the only thing is, since I had read it before, I kept going, I feel like I should be getting to this dark spot really soon. Where's the dark spot? Where's it at? And I kept reading and reading and reading. I knew it was coming. I knew it was going to be there. But by page 70, 80, I kept going, God, I feel like this is going to be coming up soon. And it didn't, which took me deeper and deeper and deeper into that mundane nothingness of disappearing here of this book. And so it actually had the same effect, because now that I'm a little older, in 22, I mean, we grew up with Reservoir Dogs and stuff where you're getting ears cut off and gasoline doused on them. And so reading this at 22 had less of an effect. Reading it now, I was sick to my stomach and almost had to put it down for a minute.
Right.
I mean, it was disturbing AF, but I'm glad I went back through it.
It's interesting. As I was reading it, I was hating it. As I was rereading it, I was hating it, because nothing happens. And I am thinking to myself, God, Bret might be overrated. Like, what? This was it was very big in 1985 when it came out, because it was different. It was, the shocking moments in this book wasn't something that most people wrote about at the time. So it was particularly shocking, I'm sure, if you were reading it in the 80s. But going through it this time, and because I've changed so much in the last 18 years, and because the world has changed so much, particularly in the last 5 years or so, I had no time and no interest in these characters or this world. And I was actively disliking the book. And then when it got to the crazy, I was pissed off. I was like, you know what? Bret Easton Ellis. You know what? Clay. Screw all these characters. I cannot relate. And that was like the most horrific stuff that I like, screw Bret for even thinking about this horrible scene, let alone committing it to a page.
Well, which scene? There's like four or five of them right in a row. Bam, bam, bam,
yeah.
bam, bam.
Yeah, I guess I'm talking about the first one that really had impact on me. But it wasn't until I got done with the book and let it digest that I realized how powerful it is, and that Bret Easton Ellis is actually a genius for going there. It's not supposed to make you happy. It's supposed to make you uncomfortable. It's supposed to make you upset. And what the thing about it, what upsets me, is because, like you've heard so much this season, I like happy stuff. I like to get away from dark stuff in my free time. I don't want to be in this dark place all the time. I like kittens and puppies and bunnies and rainbows. I like that happy stuff. And I want the darkness to be overcome somehow. And this book totally doesn't do that. Doesn't even try. That's not the point. There is no hero to this book. None whatsoever. The main character is a piece of shit. He's got a little bit of a conscience, but not enough to make him do anything about the horrific things about him. And nothing gets, quote, solved. It's just, here's the 80s. Here's LA in the 80s, and it sucks.
Yes. I think that was the thing that made me so angry. This was the first time I read a book and then saw the movie. And I was angry after I saw the movie because it was not the book. Clay had like passion and was like fiery about Julian and the Blair relationship and like all this kind of stuff. I recently read a line where the director of the movie or somebody that was working on the movie actually said they're quite certain that one line from the book ended up in the movie.
Right.
Less than 2000.
That's right.
See, I just said it. Mm-hmm. I called it less than 2000.
Yep.
Less than zero. And I think that was the first time where I went, wow, this is how movies screw up good art. But I don't know how you would have done. I mean, it'd be easier to do now because everything is just so anti-hero based and all that kind of stuff that we talking about. That it'd be easier to make this movie now than it would have been in 85 because studios were like, what do we buy? We bought what? What's happening? No way. Like, it can't be this way. And I hated the movie for that. Mm-hmm. And I remember just going, the whole point of this book is doing nothing can be just as detrimental to your life and to others. Think about that. He never chooses to say, hey, don't do that. Hey, this isn't right. Any of that kind of
stuff.
Call the police. He just lets all of this completely f***ed up happen because he's just numb to everything. But that's what you have when you're doing coke every day, mm-hmm. when you don't have to worry about money, mm-hmm. when you have everything handed to you and you're living and going to parties in Beverly Hills and living in that lifestyle. And that's not even LA today. Like, LA today is totally different than it was back in the 80s.
We both love Bret Easton Ellis, and I remember he was special, I think, for you, if I'm not overstating this, he was the writer that really got you into reading. I think, on a hardcore
absolutely.
level. Because you loved...
I read a bunch growing up, but it was always like, the standard stuff. I would read Michael Crichton or just the big stuff. He was the first artist like, wow, you mean you can write stuff that's not a movie that actually has up in it that opens your mind into like, I probably never put anything up my nose because of Bret Easton Ellis, but that, and I was afraid I was going to have a heart attack.
Bret Easton Ellis started writing this when he was in high school. The first draft took him 8 weeks, but he actually worked on the book for over 2 years. But it was published when he was 21 and in college.
Yep.
Imagine that.
That never happens. That's not a rare thing. That never happens.
The name of the book came from an Elvis Costello song. I didn't ever know that until I researched it for this show. Our show is actually based off Elvis Costello. He was part of what was called the literary Brat Pack. And you mentioned, his writing style of short sentence, long rambling. It's very naturalistic, very widely known as a minimalist writer. I gotta say, I've always thought this, because this review from the Washington Post was on the original back of the book of the version I read when I was about 21 or 22. Bret Easton Ellis is an extremely traditional and very serious American novelist. He counts among his parents Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald. Now, Chad, I'm pretty well read, right? I mean, I've read a lot of literature. I've read the classics. I have certainly read Scott Fitzgerald and basically everything Hemingway's ever done. I disagree with the assessment that he's a, quote, extremely traditional and serious novelist. Serious maybe, but traditional? Absolutely not. He throws traditions and conventions out the window.
Yeah, there was nothing traditional about this. I mean, it was not okay to do run-on sentences in books.
And paragraphs.
Even though that's how we think.
And paragraphs that are like a fifth of a page. Or a chapter that's like one paragraph and a fifth of the page. And just one thing to the next. So I never really understood or agreed with that quote. I will say he is a masterful writer. Even he makes the easy stuff. He does write in such a way that it says, well, I could do that. It's just some guy talking about, I did coke this, I did that. But again, it's beyond the actual structure of a sentence or a paragraph in Bret's world.
Totally.
He is setting you up beat by beat for the amazing impact that he delivers at the end.
Absolutely, 100%. And that's the thing. There's so many people that you're right, would read this book and then go, okay, I could do that. The problem is, their stuff's very surface. The reason why this works is because he is, yes, I'm going to say ninja-ing your brain.
Go.
He's just like reeling you in for 150, 160 pages and then bam, lays the cards out.
And Less Than Zero is awful. You and I have talked about how horrific and disturbing a handful of scenes are, and they're horrible. I'll tell you what, on Friday, I was so deeply disturbed by the first horrific, there's a snuff film described towards the end of the book, and it's so detailed and disturbing that and then I read an article about just the most horrific true story of somebody that was put to death and what crimes they committed. I was so disturbed on Friday morning that I literally had to stop and call someone over lunch because I'm like, I cannot focus. And I know Bret Easton Ellis, that wasn't real. But the thing is, it is real. He's describing stuff that really happens. And the whole world looks the other way. We are all like Clay. He sits there and watches these things, as you said, but doesn't do anything about them. Yep. Sometimes he's indifferent. Sometimes he's just like indifferent or apathetic and doesn't care. But more often than not, he does feel bad. He knows it's wrong, but he doesn't do anything about it. There's times when he's like, I'm going to throw up. There's times like he even expresses, dude, I don't know. I think that's kind of wrong what you're doing there. One time, I think, in the whole book.
One time in the whole book.
But you know from his internal thoughts that he doesn't agree with these things, but he doesn't do anything about it. He has got no chutzpah to stand up to his friends. If you can even call them friends, he hates these people.
But I think you just nailed something that I think is so important. And this is oftentimes where art gets misunderstood. People reading this and groups were like, oh, that's just shocking, and it was for shock value, and it's not real, and it's bullshit. Think about all the things in your life that you had a moment when you could have helped somebody out, seen something going down that maybe wasn't good, somebody doing something to a homeless person, people saying rude things to people. I mean, I don't want to go as dark as what Bret, Easton, Ellis is doing, but just think about your daily life. How many times you've had a choice, a chance to make something better, and you don't do it. And this book, like you just said, we are all like clay. There are so many things we turn a blind eye to. Some of it is shockingly horrific, that this stuff's going on. Human trafficking is going on. These things exist. But very few people do anything about it. You're not part of it. You're not doing it. You're not a part of it. So you claim to not be a part of the problem. But that's what he says.
Absolutely. I was excited to talk about this. Like, I've got basically a book report that I could do. I have highlights and notes in it and stuff like that. But I just wanted to run through a couple of the major themes to this book. First of all, the brilliant first line of the book: people are afraid to merge on the freeways in Los Angeles. That line is repeated later in the chapter and has become a darling line in people who are fans of this book. What the deeper meaning of that: people are afraid to merge. People are afraid to come together, to connect. That line isn't really about freeways. That line is about people are afraid to connect in Los Angeles and all over the world. Then there's the reoccurring bit about disappear here. And I kind of feel that disappear here, there's a billboard that he keeps seeing and thinking about that says disappear here. I always kind of thought, I think my earlier conception of that was like, get away, was like disappear from here, basically, like go back home, get out of LA. But now I think it's more like in LA, you disappear, you become a non-entity. You're a nothing.
I think that's more accurate.
We've gone at length about, the main theme I think is apathy and nihilism. Like, people just don't care about anything. They'll talk about an abortion. They're at a party on New Year's Eve and somebody's shooting up heroin in front of the whole party, and people are taking pictures of it and like cheering her on, basically.
Yeah, and later it's hanging up in her apartment.
Yes.
She's got the needle in of her friend doing it. That's how messed up they are.
Clay's best friend is a drug addict and has this huge drug debt that he has to pay off. So he ends up selling himself to pay this debt. And Clay not only shows really no emotional effect. He tries to give him money. He tries to help him out of the jam. But, he goes so far as to go to a hotel room and watch it happen. And as he's watching his friend sell himself to pay off his drug debts, he's thinking about, this is my best friend, and thinking about when they played soccer in 5th grade.
Yeah. It's so dark. And what's crazy, I think that's what really messed me up the most in this recent read of this. He doesn't go for the money. It's set up that he wants his money back.
Yeah. Clay lent him money. And
Clay lent him money, and yeah. So Clay lends him money, and he's trying to collect from Julian and all that kind of stuff. But in the end, he's not going to these dark places with his friend because of the money. He's going because he wants to seize how dark it can get.
Absolutely.
And he actually is thinking, and I think that terrifies himself as much as anything, because it's like he knows he's going, and it's not because he has to. He's doing it because he wants to.
Doesn't he even say in his head a couple times, I want to see the worst?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this isn't just some guy. This is his friend. I mean, later that night, they find a dead body of a teenager in the alleyway, and they're just laughing at it, staring at it casually, putting a cigarette in its mouth, showing no sympathy for who it might be or the body or reporting it or anything. It's like, hey, isn't this cool, dude?
Yeah, nothing.
And do you think that's like, I don't want to get too far into the field of this question, but do you think it was worse in the 80s or do you think it's worse now in terms of people's sensitivity and sympathy and empathy, or lack thereof?
I think it was worse in the 80s. And I think the reason why is because even though technology can divide as much as it does bring together, it just seems to me that we're more aware of what's going on in the world. And I don't think it's possible to completely remove all feeling from that. We're a much more connected society today. The world seems a little bit more up today. Like things are, you see all this stuff, but it's because we're more connected. I think the more connected we are and the more world we are, I think the more aware we become.
Good point. I don't know if that's true. Let me take the devil's advocate position on that. We're more connected now on a superficial level. The more we're connected by our technology, the more we are afraid to merge. Because I just think about going to the airport. At the time I was reading this book, you would go to the airport, I would go to the airport and hang out at the bar and talk to people. Literally the person next to me. Or across the bar or whatever, just making random friends. Now you go to that same bar and you're both on your phones. You're both on your tablets. You literally pay no attention to the person next to you. You pay no attention to the person sitting next to you on the plane other than maybe saying hi. You're not having a 2-hour conversation or whatever. So we are more connected, but I think on a superficial level. When something bad happens and somebody posts something about this horrific atrocity, yeah, you get lots of people chiming in and saying, oh, that's so bad. But it's just, that's it. I mean, it's just like a thumbs up or a thumbs down or a like or just sharing oh, I'm sorry. But is that really, are we really any more sensitive now and more connected? I don't know.
I don't know. But see, I also think part of that also might be us growing up. You know what I mean? Like, 'cause I had my Walkman and all that kind of stuff. I made my Discman that I would take on the airplanes. If I didn't want to talk, if I wanted to disappear, I didn't have to talk to the person next to me. And that hadn't changed since I started flying when I was young. Mm-hmm. I used to actually enjoy talking to people on planes and in the airport a lot more often. And now, just stay the F away from me, man. Like, I put the headphones on because I don't want to talk to them. But it's also because I have 10 times the amount of stuff in my brain that I'm dealing with now than I ever did when I was 18, when I was 22. I used to go chat every flight attendant up in the back. I don't know. Part of that might be where we're at. But the young people I've talked to seem to be way more in touch with their feelings. Part of it might be age. Part of it might be where you're at in life. Part of it depends on what you've got going on in your life personally as well. So I don't know if we can make a total blatant statement.
Yeah, we can't.
About that question, because I think it's dependent on who you are.
It's an interesting discussion. Feel free to chime in on social media. Let us know your thoughts on this subject, especially over the, winter break we're taking. You can keep the conversation going. Okay, so this is about kind of loss of innocence. There was a time in Clay's life, you get the impression, where it wasn't always this way. There's this ongoing story within the story in italics where he's dreaming back about like this vacation he took with his family to Palm Beach, and he was with his grandparents and he was in love with Blair, and it was like he's kind of, I mean, there was some weird stuff going on, but like he was a happy boy at one point.
Yeah.
And it was just simple stuff like hanging out with his grandma by the pool, and basic things like that. So to me, he's kind of the Holden Caulfield of the 1980s. Further, the breakdown of the family unit. These parents don't parent at all. I mean,
No.
they're at dinner together. They're having Christmas together. They're not connecting whatsoever. They're all in their own little worlds. So this apathy and materialism has been passed on from generation to generation. Their kids are like fashionable accessories. And the second to last page, I highlighted this because it just seems to drive that point home. Parents are so hungry and unfulfilled that they ate their own children. I don't know. Just really says it all, doesn't it?
That says it all. If you haven't read Less Than Zero, you got to read it. If you saw the movie and then you didn't read the book, you definitely need to read the book.
If you can stomach it, be prepared.
I mean, the last 30 pages, are going to be dark. But ultimately, there's real importance in this book. And we've already stated it, but I can't state it enough. We look the other way so much in life. And if you just take a minute and you think, and you try to remind yourself to not do that, you're going to impact other people's lives in positive ways rather than being completely self-absorbed and nihilistic and selfish and narcissistic.
Extremely well said. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for this season.
Yes.
We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for everyone that is listening to the show and engaging on social media and just taking this ride with us. Like Adam said earlier, we do this because we want to do it, because we want to celebrate the stuff that we love. We want to poke at the things that don't hold up and just have fun.